Good afternoon, everyone, on what's probably been so far the biggest day for Kelston Boys High School and their Movember Education Challenge. It is a pleasure and a privilege to have with me here, to my right, on the left there, Ms. Mary Niulesa, who of course is the curriculum lead for the English department, and on my left, right-hand side, my daughter Ellena, and the two of them are here today really to discuss the whole situation with regards to the fact that both their fathers had major heart surgery in the course of the last 3.5 years. So we're here for them to recollect on what happened, ideally to present both a Pākehā and a Pacifica view of things that occurred. Just by way of background, Ms. Niulesa's father, who's only a couple of years older than I am, had his surgery just about a year ago in that way. So that's the discussion we're going to have today in support of the Movember Foundation and what we're doing here at Kelston Boys during the course of this month. Do you remember, Ellena, when on the 21st of May, yes, 2021, all right, I came around from the anaesthetic following the surgery I had to have my aortic valve in my heart replaced and a single stent put in.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I remember. I don't like hospitals, so walking into the hospital I was just very uneasy and never actually experienced anyone straight out of an operation or straight out of that.
Yeah.
And so not knowing what to expect, and I think you may have struggled to even wake up slightly.
Mm-hmm.
We were waiting outside and waiting. We arrived after your operation had finished, and then we were waiting outside and they said that you hadn't woken up yet. And I think that initially was a little bit scary, not knowing what was happening or what was going on. But then we managed to come in and see you, and then obviously medication and a few funny stories came out, and classic English teacher, you saw a white flash in front of you and you said it reminded you of the part in the Lord of the Flies. And yeah, it was Mum and I just spent the evening just laughing at you basically.
Yeah, so I ended up in the high dependency unit late on the Friday afternoon and was there for about 48 hours. I suppose most significant event with that, as it gradually recovered, was that there was obviously a celebrity in the cubicle next to where I was, from the Republic of Ireland. And this person obviously had their entourage of publicity people, etc., trying to deal with a heart situation which was requiring phone calls middle of the night through to Dublin midday that previous day and all of that. And I did not get any sleep whatsoever on that particular night. And the other event that's associated with it before I went into a general ward was I had a partial collapse of one of my lungs, and that wasn't improving as anybody wanted through sort of standard things. So I actually had a CPAP mask placed over my face, and that was therefore sort of strengthening the lungs as it went with it. And the first couple of occasions they took it off, everything was fine. They did say it may be the case that you were going to feel rather unwell at some particular point because the sheer sort of plastic smell there with it. And at about 2:30 on the Sunday morning, they took it off for the third time, and I was violently ill. I've never felt so sick at that particular point. But then again, 10 hours later, I was onto a general ward for the 6 days that followed. Mary, what about your father's experience?
Yeah, ours was a little bit weird because Dad came off, he actually had a stroke. So I remember it very, very clearly. It was the day of the school ball last year, and I got a phone call about 7 o'clock just as I arrived at the function to say that he was in hospital and that he'd been feeling weak. That was the beginning of it, and so that was September 23. I recall it very, very clearly, and that stroke ended with a 5-day hospital stay. And it was during that hospital stay that we discovered that his arteries were so incredibly clogged that he was considered a critical case and in need of urgent heart surgery, open heart surgery. They went through a number of tests, and essentially he was an inpatient who was allowed leave to go out from the hospital for almost a month before his surgery in November. So we're about November 13 now. We are 10 days in a year from when he actually had the open heart surgery. And it was a quadruple bypass. So essentially the way they described it to us was that of the 3 arteries that sort of feed in towards the heart, now don't shoot me if I have my anatomy incorrect, but essentially we've got an artery at the back which is at 100% clogged, one on the side that was at 85%, and one on the front that was at 65. So the doctors were pretty amazed that he could even be alive and walking around and doing Zumba and doing all these different things. In and of himself, he didn't feel unwell, but it was quite a shock to the family. And the idea that our father could be taken from us so quickly and swiftly, it rocked all of us.
Yeah.
I remember getting a phone call telling me after the initial stroke, we came back to school and we had exams that first week.
Right.
And it was during the English exam that I got the phone call to say that he was a critical patient and in need of that surgery, of that open heart surgery. And so I literally burst into tears. And I think as the family members, it's one thing I know for the patient, for my father, but it's quite another thing for the family members to stand beside. Oh my gosh, I'm getting teary already. To stand beside and to helplessly watch from the sidelines. And it just goes to show, I think, a thing in just in general, in terms of men's health, men are generally, especially dads, seem to be far less concerned about themselves than they are about their families. And so when things like that happen, you're just confronted with the reality of your mortality, and you are so painfully aware of how much your dad's been there for you, and actually how much he probably hasn't been there for himself, a trait which I'm sure many men around the country share. And also one of the great reasons as to why we've got this month to remember that, men suffering in silence and not even taking care of themselves is a very, very poor and sad legacy to leave for our country, and it would be really, really great if we could just turn those things around. So this month has been an incredible month to reflect and to think back on how painful that was. But if I come back to that experience, I totally resonate with you in terms of not knowing what it would be like to see a patient come out of such a critical surgery. Having said that, I have 2 uncles who have had similar surgeries, one of whom passed away in Australia, and this is my father's brothers, and another one who miraculously did manage to survive, and I do think it was a pig that they used to replace the valve.
Right.
However, it's a hereditary thing for our family, as we have now discovered. And I remember that feeling, just like, seeing your father come out of ICU, or even in ICU. I don't know if you saw your dad in ICU, but when I saw mine, I just, oh my goodness, I could not believe that a human could still be alive in that condition.
Those percentages, Mary, you quoted of the blockages that were in your dad's heart, so with the 3 of them and the connection therefore to each of the valves, I mean, in my particular case, I think the worst one was only at 50%, where they actually put the stent in at that point, and I had about 4 blockages, but it was between about 25 and there's one that was worse at 50%.
That's quite sobering hearing that, and the interesting thing is, even though the percentages are different, it just does not alleviate or ameliorate any of that sense of of pain and shock that we feel when that happens. Oh wow!
When I remember when Mum and Dad sat me down and then told me about the heart, and then I think Mum may have gone back to the doctors to just get more of an understanding. the doctor said to Mum, Phil, or my dad's not going to have a heart attack, he's just going to die. Like, his valve will just shut off and he will just die. Like, to hear that, like, not knowing, having a heart issue, not knowing what that is, but then to hear it in those, like, such simple words is so hard, like, it's a lot.
It is a lot. And it's, I remember, you know, sort of thinking for my father, because my dad doesn't really, he doesn't talk about his feelings a lot. So to see him, like, rocked by that, and to see him go really, really silent, gosh, it's hard, because it's like the strongest person that you know is suffering. So, I remember they told us, we all sat there in the room, and it was just silent. It was just silent, thinking that we might not. So at the same time, I remember him asking, is there anything else that we could do? Could we, like, treat this with medication? I remember that so clearly. And the doctor was so clear, just saying that we can't even put a stent in, because there is just nothing, you know, there is no way that would even mildly address the issues that you've got. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, if he's brave, then I'll be brave. You know. And so eventually he said, actually, for the love of my children, I want to be here for my children. My wife has gone. They have no one else. They just have me. I need to be here for my kids. Let's do this. And he was the one who decided. So, you know, I think with that sort of resolve, that's basically what held us a little bit. And, you know, really grateful for the community that we've got here at Kelston, just in terms of the staff and the students, and the management, even just for understanding. A lot of what happened at that time was so, I mean, I just said to you before we came in here, last year was potentially the worst year of my life, going through all those things with Dad. And if I can just come back to the, you know, after seeing him go into that surgery, the weight, you know, it's a thing with, you know, with Islanders, our experience of the weight. I don't know how you guys did it, but for us, my father's sister, her husband, they were there with us in the morning before we released him to go and be into that surgery. And so they stayed with us, and they waited with us all through that surgery, and we all waited together until we got the phone call. And then they waited with us after, hoping like mad that we would, you know, he would be, you know, just 100% fine and be able to come out of it a couple of hours after. But he didn't come out of it at all. And it wasn't until the next day that I got a phone call at about 6 a.m. from one of the nurses saying, he's stirring. He had quite a bit of trouble through the night, and we actually thought we almost lost him there, you know, because he just wasn't responding. And it had been a long time since he'd been under, and they were scared that they wouldn't be able to bring him back. But he was starting to respond, and I just, At that point, we all just got straight back up. We all rushed over to the hospital to go sit at the bedside, and I got my family on, you know, on video call. And I'm just rushing to get there so we can do our prayers, and, you know, we could just do everything that we've been taught and raised how to do in those situations. And just to hope to hear that he would actually say something. But, you know, as you know, and Phil, you probably have a recollection of this, like he couldn't speak. He was making grunts and noises, and that was even more distressing, because then the next question is, will he recover his brain function? You know?
Nothing simple and straightforward with it in that way. As I say, I had that issue with my lungs, which fortunately, although felt unwell, its consequence put me back on track to then be able to be taken from the HDU into a general ward. I suppose the other one I had was actually on the last day I was there, or in the 24 hours before I left. They came to remove some of the stitches. So not only was my chest opened for the open heart surgery, but also they then took veins from the inside of my left thigh. And on the Thursday, they came to start removing whatever they needed to with it. There'd been a wait in the first instance, and then it took quite a bit longer and the nurses were doing it in the end needed the charge nurse to come, and therefore I was lying in a particular position for, rather than for about 30 to 40 minutes that they said, probably towards an hour and a half. And in that time my bad knee locked. Right, it would not bend. It was out there straight, and it was like that. So that would have been 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I was like that basically until the following morning, when getting up, having a walker to get to the toilet and things, sitting there, I then just tried very gently to move it, and the knee started to bend again.
Wow.
And things. And the other thing, I suppose, about it with regards to anaesthetics, etc., and how long that stays in your body, and obviously how long it took your dad to recover in hospital with it, there's always the sheer thing of then, once you get back into normal eating patterns, etc., that something can trigger off feeling unwell. And so I had two occasions, I suppose, within the year after the surgery, where you ended up back in hospital because you'd been violently ill again, and they wanted to make sure that all that was checked out. So going there is it. And also, as we spoke before, Mary, no single person's experience is going to be sort of easy and straightforward with it, either in terms of the after effects of the surgery, etc., or in the simple wait beforehand. I mean, people who you see there who have had a fortnight in hospital going nowhere with it. There's certainly one gentleman I remember with that, who, when I went in on the Thursday to be operated first thing on the Friday, had been in North Shore and then Auckland Hospital for about 10 days, and he didn't get his surgery until the Monday following. Other people who've been in and out of hospital because of complications over the course of weeks and months with it. Ellena, remembering the day you took me home, because Mum wasn't available.
No, so the day that we took Dad home, Mum was at a conference up north, potentially. I came and picked you up, took you home, and then I think I had dance teaching or something on in the evening that I couldn't miss. So then my auntie came over to look up, make sure that you were okay, look after you for a few hours, and then my partner came and looked after you, just to make sure that you weren't going to fall over walking around, or you weren't going to collapse anywhere. But it was a long few days after you got back from hospital, because all you would do was recite the second you walked in that hospital door to the second you walked out of that hospital door. Every single nurse that approached you, you told that story from the beginning to end, and then repeated back at the beginning like 10 times throughout 2 days. So, but yeah, we got it sorted. We gave you a little bell to ding if you needed us, a little ringer. But yeah,
because the original plan, being operated on towards the end of May, was to come back at the beginning of term 3, which would have been about 9 weeks. Now, with the surgery I'd have, they were talking anything up to 12 weeks with regards to that. And at a late stage towards the end of term 2 in June, I actually made the decision I wanted to take the full 12 weeks, another 3 weeks into that particular term. I remember we went on a Friday to the Marae in Mount Albert, and I was due to, and went to that. It was all wonderful. I was due to start again on the Monday, and thought good about it. Went down with a cold over the weekend. Right, that took out another week or so, and then we were back into lockdown. For another
COVID. Oh no.
Yes, and we were back into lockdown for another occasion there. So instead of trying to start end of July or even middle of August, it was actually after Labour weekend before I actually got back into the classroom in front of it, and just the actual efforts that you, Mary, made, the gentleman who came to take my classes.
Oh, bless you, I remember.
obviously the impact upon Yasser as well as my whānau group colleague, etc. with that. And
John
certainly
came into the house. John came and dropped off a gift basket.
Yes, yes, John Senio's contribution there as the Henry House leader, Kaimanaki.
No, goodness, I'm just listening to this and I'm thinking, you know, while our experiences are wildly different, they're actually incredibly similar at the same time. So, you know, gosh, how far back can we go in this conversation? I think everything that, you know, you experienced from, you know, being in hospital and, you know, being frustrated with not being able to be mobile as you want to be. I remember being with Dad and, you know, sort of his complications that occurred. And you're right. I think for us, we were in Auckland Hospital an extra 10, we were there for 10 days, 10 plus days after he came out of ICU and out of HDU and then into a general ward. And then there was some other complication, like he couldn't eat and he wasn't able to keep food down. So they were thinking some kind of gastroenteritis or some other thing that was happening then. I think by that stage my father was wondering whether or not he'd ever be able to taste food again. And, you know, it's a big deal. And I remember actually not long after he was discharged, the day we brought him home was so happy, but 7 days later we were back at Auckland Hospital. And this time it was it was Waitakere Hospital this time. This time it was for, they discovered that he was dehydrated and that it was a kidney issue and there was some problem with the medication and it was quite a journey, and I'm sure you had the same thing, you know, happening all the way through.
No, you carry
No, please.
I remember the Dad going back into hospital after, I don't know when the first few times, how long it was.
It must have been about 3 or 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And I remember having a relatively large, I'm assuming it might have been one of our fish suppers, right there. And that would have been a Thursday evening. And by about 3 o'clock in the morning, I felt really bad. I wanted to be sick without actually being so.
Yes.
And the recommendation was get an ambulance involved. And so they took me in, and you lie there waiting for things to happen, and was over the shore and was duly unwell probably another 12, 15 hours later. All right, having had virtually nothing. But so whatever it was that was going on there, obviously my system, the stomach, digestive system just couldn't take the pressure with it. And another overnight stay. And then there was that one after that where, again, it was on a weekend. So I ended up in Waitakere, I think it was for 2 nights there with it. And again, just, I suppose, making complications with your lifestyle in terms of what you're eating or perhaps drinking, and the effect that has.
It's an incredible thing because all of these things, you know, it's not one event. It's a series of ongoing complications and events and changes. And even now, you know, when I always get freaked out when I see a particular, you know, phone number come up on mine, because I'm thinking this is the extension that comes from the hospital, you know, or anyone to do with the Ministry of Health has this, you know. I was like, oh gosh, what's the next thing?
It leaves that like fear of
that they found something. There's something else that's coming. And having said that, though, one of the saving graces, and I shared this with you earlier, was that we weren't alone, you know, in our journey. We had our family, we had our church people, and we had our friends, and we had all of this community behind us. But my dad obviously is in hospital on his own for all of those hours, you know. And, you know, it's my dad's idea of fun is going to the TAB and hanging out with his mates, you know, and you're going to do church stuff or family things. But you know, when you're stuck in that space, you've got nobody. And so we were really, really blessed that when he was brought in for his, for the stroke, the gentleman who was actually next to him, because we were initially placed in a single room, but he ended up sharing a room with a man called David, who became a really good friend. And so David's Kiwi European, and these two built their little friendship over watching the rugby, you know, on his phone. And it's actually one of the reasons why my dad has Sky on his phone now, because he saw that it was possible hospital with his friend David, and that's what kept them both sane there. And so they got to bonding over this, and they'd talk about, you know, the rugby and their families, and even to the point where David was already waiting for heart surgery, but we didn't even know at that stage that Dad needed heart surgery.
Yeah.
You know, we were still waiting the test to come back and say if there's some. He just said there was something. He felt something wrong with his chest, and that's why we pushed to have it checked before we left after the stroke. So anyway, we fast forward, and Dad has his surgery, and his family are calling us, and they're checking in on us, and we're at Auckland Hospital. They're waiting at Waitakere Hospital, and then. You know, we're passing on the messages to Dad, and then once Dad was well enough, he called them, and they had a good chat on the phone, and David hadn't had his surgery at that point. But then when David had his surgery, we did the same thing, and we kept that bond, and,
nice.
you know, we stayed in touch with them. We visited their bedside, and David had some complications with his surgery, and we were there with his family as they were walking through that. And then, you know, now they're like Facebook friends.
Yeah, my closest association would have been with John Senio, because 6 months after I had my surgery, his father had similar surgery in that way, which, as I did with you, Mary, I talked things through with him, having been there, what stage he is at, etc. And it's something I must check again with John.
To see how's
there with it. So I'm in a situation, I'm having another ECG on the 28th, and a yearly checkup with my not the surgeon, but the heart specialist down at the Heart Group in New Lynn, because having had a 2-year check, would have been, September last year, the concern there on the ECG was the measurement of the root of my aortic valve, which again is different to where the actual valve itself is, and getting to talk numbers, and the fact that the ECG was 4 times what the actual situation was, having had then an aortogram. So you do need to keep the check going, I think, with it, in terms of making sure that everything's fine.
And it's a good reminder too. I'm so grateful to you for sharing all those things with me. You're probably only the person that I know who was able to articulate the experience clearly for me to understand, and give me that insight about what that must feel like and things to look out for. And even though we had the doctors and other people, you know, roughly in the community who would just sort of, you know, they just sort of wiped it off like, he'll be all right. But I wanted to know the ins and outs, and you helped me to understand them even before I got to the doctor's appointments, which was great because it actually expedited the process, because they weren't having to explain things to me that you'd already explained. And in fact, they were quite surprised that I knew. They're like, "Are you a medical student?" And I was like, "No, I just have a very good teacher." And that was really, really good. I think in terms of the ongoing care that you mentioned and the ongoing checking, I think when you are healthy, like my father, he couldn't wait to get back to his life because he was so much stronger, and you know, he does Zumba six times a week these days.
Right.
And the hard thing for him is actually just making sure we stay on the eating thing, which is why, you know, that's really important. It's like, nah, too much salt. No, you can't have this. But you can only be a nagging Nancy for so long. And, you know, eventually what I've noticed is that he has made those changes. Just needs like gentle reminders every now and then. But sometimes even I forget that, you know, that he still needs that reminding and those checkups. So it's good. It's good for times like this to sit back and remember.
And it's important to keep nagging. Hey, Ellena.
Well, we had a deal.
Yes,
we?
no, we, yes.
What's
we
the deal?
The deal was he had to book his checkup, his heart checkup, and then I will come here and film this for him.
Ah, very good.
So we've
very
done
good.
that.
You're a good daughter.
And I think just going back to all the, I guess, the reason why we're here today filming this for this month and the men's mental health and everything is, men's health in general, if Dad hadn't have gone and got his knee checked, we would never probably have known about his heart. But then also going back to your dad saying that he knew that something was wrong in his chest, he knew, like, you know your body best. You need to listen to your body. If you know something's wrong, if you're not feeling normal or yourself, that you need to look after yourself because no one else knows You are the only one that knows how your body's feeling.
Yep.
If you're tired, you may be tired for a different reason.
Yes.
So you've got
Yeah.
to get things checked up.
Yeah,
and
indeed.
Look after yourselves.
Yeah. Ellena's been the person in charge of my Movember journey over the course of the last 3 years when I decided I wanted to do it, and that first really successful year that I had in raising over $1,000, and the support that a number of people on the staff who've donated each year, last year and in 2022, and to actually have the idea of setting it up as a school-wide thing. What has occurred this morning with the tag competition and people watching it and donations made raised us over another $70. So we are well over halfway now towards the target, and we're not even halfway through the month. I'm going to wrap this up, I think, with a big thank you, Mary, for your part here this morning and discussion, and a big thank you to my daughter, Ellena. All right, and we will keep in touch about this and hopefully get lots of reactions from you. So boys, colleagues, all the best, all right? Look after yourselves, okay? And we'll talk again soon.